In punctuation, the full stop or period is a punctuation mark placed at the end of a sentence. The full stop glyph is sometimes called a baseline dot because, typographically, it is a dot on the baseline. This term distinguishes the baseline dot from the interpunct. The full stop glyph is also used for other purposes. It is often used at the end of an initial letter used to stand for a name, and is sometimes used at the end of individual letters in an initialism. It also has multiple contexts in mathematics and computing, where it may be called dot or point. History. The full stop symbol derives from the Greek punctuation introduced by Aristophanes of Byzantium in the 3rd century BC. In his system, there were a series of dots whose placement determined their meaning. The full stop at the end of a completed thought or expression was marked by the high dot, called the stigm telia, marked a division in a thought occasioning a longer breath, and the low dot, called the hyposteme or underdot, marked a division in a thought occasioning a shorter breath. In practice, scribes mostly employed the full stop, and the others fell out of use and were later replaced by other symbols. From the 9th century, the full stop began appearing as a low mark instead of a high one. By the advent of printing in Western Europe, the low mark was regular and then universal. The name period is first attested in Alfred Covensham's Old English treatment on grammar. There, it is distinguished from the full stop and continues the Greek underdot's earlier function as a comma between phrases. It shifted its meaning to a dot marking a full stop in the works of the 16th century grammarians. In 19th century texts, both British English and American English were consistent in their usage of the terms period and full stop. The word period was used as a name for what printers often called the full point, or the punctuation mark that was a dot on the baseline and used in several situations. The phrase full stop was only used to refer to the punctuation mark when it was used to terminate a sentence. At some point during the 20th century, British usage diverged, adopting full stop as the more generic term, while American English continued to retain the traditional usage. Full stops are one of the most commonly used punctuation marks. Analysis of texts indicate that approximately half of all punctuation marks used are full stops. Ending sentences. Full stops are used to indicate the end of sentences which are not questions or exclamations. Full stops after initials. It is usual to use full stops after initials A. Milne, George W. Bush. Abbreviations. A full stop is used after some abbreviations. If the abbreviation ends a declaratory sentence, there is no additional period immediately following the full stop that ends the abbreviation. This is called haplography. Though two full stops might be expected, conventionally only one is written. In the case of an interrogative or exclamatory sentence ending with an abbreviation, a question or exclamation mark can still be added. Abbreviations and personal titles of address according to the Oxford AZ of Grammar and Punctuation. If the abbreviation includes both the first and last letter of the abbreviated word, as in Mr., and Dr., a full stop is not used. This does not include, for example, the standard abbreviations for titles such as Professor or Reverend, because they do not end with the last letter of the word they are abbreviating. Among Americans, however, the common convention is to include the period after these abbreviations. Acronyms and initialisms. In acronyms and initialisms, full stops are somewhat more often placed after each initial in American English than in British English, but this depends much upon the house style of a particular writer or publisher. The American Chicago Manual of Style now deprecates the use of full stops in acronyms. Mathematics. The period glyph is used in the presentation of numbers, but in only one of two alternate styles at a time. In the more prevalent usage in English-speaking countries, it represents a decimal separator, visually dividing whole numbers from fractional parts. The comma is then used to separate the whole number parts into groups of 3 digits each, when numbers are sufficiently large. 1.007 1000, 2.007, 1,000,000, 3.007. The more prevalent usage in much of Europe, Southern Africa, and Latin America reverses the roles of the comma and full stop glyph, but sometimes substitutes a space for a full stop. 1007, 1.002, 0007 or 1002, 007, 1.002, 003, 007 or 1,000,000, 2003, 007. In countries that use the comma as a decimal separator, the full stop is sometimes found as a multiplication sign, for example, 5, 2. 2 equals 10, 4. This usage is impractical in cases where the full stop is used as a decimal separator, hence the use of the interpunct. 5.22 equals 10.4. This notation is also seen when multiplying units in science. For example, 50 km per hour could be written as 50 km h-1. In computing, the full stop is often used as a delimiter, such as in DNS lookups, web addresses, and file names. www.wikipedia.org document.txt 192.168.0.1 It is used in many programming languages as an important part of the syntax. C uses it as a means of accessing a member of a struct, and this syntax was inherited by C++ as a means of accessing a member of a class or object. Java and Python also follow this convention. Pascal uses it both as a means of accessing a member of a record set, a member of an object, and after the end construct which defines the body of the program. In Erlang, Prolog, and Smalltalk, it marks the end of a statement. In a regular expression, it represents a match of any character. In Perl and PHP, the full stop is the string concatenation operator. In the Haskell Standard Library, the full stop is the function composition operator. In file systems, the full stop is commonly used to separate the extension of a file name from the name of the file. RISC OS uses full stops to separate levels of the hierarchical file system when writing path names, similar to in Unix-based systems and in MS-DOS-based systems and the Windows NT systems that succeeded them. In Unix-like operating systems, some applications treat files or directories that start with a full stop as hidden. This means that they are not displayed or listed to the user by default. In Unix-like systems and Microsoft Windows, the dot character represents the working directory of the file system. 2 dots represent the parent directory of the working directory. Bourne shell-derived command line interpreters, such as sh, ksh, and bash, use the dot as a command to read a file and execute its content in the running interpreter. Telegraphy. The term stop was used in telegrams in place of the full stop. The end of a sentence would be marked by stop, because punctuation cost extra. Punctuation styles when quoting. The practice in American English and in Canada is to place full stops and commas inside quotation marks almost all the time. In the British system, which is also called logical quotation, full stops and commas are placed according to grammatical sense. This means that when they apply to the whole sentence, they are placed outside. When they apply only to the quoted material, they are placed inside. For example, they are placed outside in the cases of words as words, titles of short-form works, and quoted sentence fragments. Carefree means free from care or anxiety. Carefree means free from care or anxiety. Bruce Springsteen, nicknamed The Boss, performed American Skin. Eric Clapton, nicknamed God, wrote Bell Bottom Blues. He said, "I love music." There is some national crossover. American style is common in British fiction writing. British style is rare in formal American English, but it is not unheard of. For example, the Chicago Manual of Style recommends it for fields in which comma placement could affect the meaning of the quoted material, such as linguistics and literary criticism. The American rule was common throughout the English language until the early 19th century. Use of placement according to grammatical sense, now the common British practice, was advocated in the influential book The King's English by Fowler and Fowler, published in 1906. References: The Chicago Manual of Style, 14th and 15th editions, Hart's Rules for Compositors and Readers at the University Press, Oxford. Spacing after a full stop. There have been a number of practices relating to the spacing after a full stop. Some examples are listed below. 1. Word space. This is the current convention in most countries that use the isobasic Latin alphabet for published and final written work, as well as digital media. 2. Word spaces. It is sometimes claimed that the two-space convention stems from the use of the monospaced font on typewriters. But in fact that convention replicates much earlier typography. The intent was to provide a clear break between sentences. This spacing method was gradually replaced by the single-space convention in published print, where space is at a premium, and continues in much digital media. 1. Widened space. This spacing was seen in historical typesetting practices. It has also been used in other typesetting systems such as the Linotype machine and the text system. Modern computer-based digital fonts can adjust the spacing after terminal punctuation as well, creating space slightly wider than a standard word space. Full stops in other scripts. Although the present Greek full stop is romanized as a Latin full stop and encoded identically with the full stop in Unicode, the historic full stop in Greek was a high dot and the low dot functioned as a kind of comma, as noted above. The low dot was increasingly but irregularly used to mark full stops after the 9th century and was fully adapted after the advent of print. The tellier should also be distinguished from the annotellier mark, which is named high stop, but looks like an interpunct and principally functions as the Greek semicolon. The Armenian script uses the. It looks similar to the, but has always round dots. In some Asian languages, notably Chinese and Japanese, a small circle is used instead of a solid dot. Notably, in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau usage, the full stop is written at center height instead of on the line. In the Devanagari script, used to write Hindi and Sanskrit among other Indian languages, a vertical line is used to mark the end of a sentence. In Hindi, it is known as Purna Viram in Hindian, Daa in Bengali. Some Indian languages also use the full stop, such as Marathi. In Tamil it is known as Mutrupalli, which means end dot. In Sinhala, it is known as Kundaliya, symbol, full stop. Periods were later introduced into Sinhala script after the introduction of paper due to the influence of Western languages. See also Sinhala numerals. Urdu uses the symbol. In Thai, no symbol corresponding to the full stop is used as terminal punctuation. A sentence is written without spaces, and a space is typically used to mark the end of a clause or sentence. In the GEZ script used to write Amharic and several other Ethiopian and Eritrean languages, the equivalent of the full stop following a sentence is the arat netib, which means 4 dots. The 2 dots on the right are slightly ascending from the 2 on the left with space in between them. Encodings. The character is encoded at U+002E. Full stop. There is also U+2E3C stenographic full stop. In text messages, researchers from Binghamton University performed a small study on young adults and found that text messages that included sentences ended with full stops, as opposed to those with no terminal punctuation, were perceived as insincere, though they stipulated that their results apply only to this particular medium of communication. Our sense is that, because text messages were informal and had a chatty kind of feeling to them, that a period may have seemed stuffy, too formal. In that context, said head researcher Cecilia Kling, the study did not find handwritten notes to be affected.